Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming out this evening, taking time out of your very busy schedules to be with us tonight to look at the proposal for the developments around Lillian Webb Park. We're very excited about it. We think it offers a lot for the city. It offers a lot for us long term in the city. So we're unlike a few weeks ago when we had the open forum and we kind of discussed concepts and took feedback from citizens and business leaders on which direction we should head. The architecture team and the development team really paid a lot of attention to some very copious notes and have, I think, reached a conceptual design level that took a lot of that into consideration. So with that, here's our agenda. Mayor Johnson will be giving us an overview. I'll talk about the zoning process. Matt Mason with the development team will introduce his team and then talk about the development market studies. Mark Wolf has flown in with the architecture team to talk about what this is going to look like, how the stacking plan, etc. And then Mayor Johnson and myself will kind of go through some of the details of the RAIOD and the LCI, etc. And then following that, we're going to reserve 30 minutes for Q&A. Paige will be moderating that for us again. Thank you, Paige, for coming in. And we will we'll take feedback and hopefully we'll learn what your thoughts are. So, Mayor?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank John Demas, who has taken on the role as the chair of the Downtown Development Authority. I think most of you know what the Downtown Development Authority is, but it's a 7-member board. They're all citizens. They get paid nada and do a lot of work on behalf of the city. And they really help with these type of developments. We can't do this as a city. And most of the cities that are doing things that are around the state have these downtown development authorities to do these type of projects. So let me thank the council. They're all here. I think Andrew Dixon is still out of town. They're all here tonight. I believe most of everybody from the DDA is here as well, so I appreciate that. One thing I'd like to start with, when I was first elected mayor 10 years ago, we did something with we were doing our planning, and we came up with in order to have Norcross a place to imagine, we created the Imagination Proclamation, and it's really done well for us through the years. And I'd like to read one section. This is just the opening section of the Imagination Proclamation, which I really think kind of fits into what we're talking about tonight. It said, there comes a time when a community finds itself at a point where the ways of the past and the ways of the future intersect. A moment when it becomes necessary to conceive of a place designed to endure inevitable changes and remain constant, thriving, unified as a community for generations. Communities that embrace and cultivate the spirit of creativity and innovation are more likely to thrive and prosper both spiritually and economically. Hence, the city of Norcross will, and then it goes on to talk about the tenets of this Imagination Proclamation. And I think that's really done well for us through the years, and we've kind of lived by that. And this is one of those moments in time where we've got a big decision to do. And one of the things that we learned about by doing this Imagination Proclamation is that there's the field of dreams, build it and they will come. Well, the thing that we might have learned in the Imagination Proclamation is let them build it. So as the community has input, we have the DDA, the council, the community members, planning and zoning, architectural review board, really everybody has a part in making the community what it's going to be now, next week, next month, and so forth. So that's been very, very exciting to be a part of. We've done a lot of studies in Norcross. We're required to do a comp plan, so we got the 2034 comp plan, RAIOD overlay, which they'll talk about. We got a lot of initials. and TAD, tax allocation district. We've studied parking, we've had LCI studies. So we've done numerous studies and action plans, so we have a direction for the future. Although it's kind of general, now we're getting more specific. The Lillian Webb Park was identified as a top priority catalyst. When I was elected mayor, the decision was, do we move towards Beaufort Highway or basically build a wall and just stop here? And the decision of the council at that time, we've been forward thinking, is to move down towards Beaufort Highway. Of course, Lillian Webb Park was an incredible piece. Skips Parkside has really added to that. And then once we hit Beaufort Highway, we put the radar, as a redevelopment overlay in place, so that as Beaufort Highway didn't get to be Beaufort Highway overnight. And it's not going to change overnight. It's going to take years to change Beaufort Highway, but you have to have a plan, and you have to have some rules and regulations that are think about the future and what you want. So for instance, in the layout, it doesn't allow another pawn shop. It doesn't allow another car dealership. It doesn't allow another parts store, because we got plenty of those. And so it doesn't allow some things. It encourages some other things, which is mixed use, which is one of the reasons we're here tonight. Again, walkability is, and we talk about the creative class. We talk about living in lifelong communities, living here from birth to death, being able to do that, preserving single-family residential. And one of the nice things for the city is we have the most robust transit in Gwinnett County here in our area. It's like 4 different bus routes that come through here. And as we go towards the future, there's a lot of things going on county-wise that's going to consider additional transit and other some walking trails through the whole county. We're working with the county on that right now. We've done some planning on that, and Pinnacle Park is going to be part of that. The whole Beaver Ruin Creek is going to be part of those walking and biking trails. Obviously, beautification in the area has been very key for us all along. The timing is critical. We all know the sad news that West Rock is leaving us to go to the perimeter area. There's several reasons why they decided to do that. They merged with a company that was more international. They basically doubled in size in a matter of a few minutes. And so they wanted to have all their people together. So at the point where they are in Norcross, they basically were a family business, grew up in Norcross, and basically outgrew the site. And in the current site, they've got about 650 employees. And we thought that they were planning to move out around by October, but I think that's more like spring right now. And it's up for sale, and I know there's interest there. But they also have international business, and they'll have direct access to a MARTA line going right to the airport. And also, they want, like just about everybody else, to be able to attract millennials. So that's another area that's really hot right now with that. What others are doing. I'm not going to read all these for you, but this is, you see the newspaper like I do, and there's announcements almost every month about developments going in and around us. We did our retreat this year up at Sugar Hill. This is not on the slide, but Sugar Hill is doing some amazing things. They're basically creating a whole down center from nothing. They use this kind of city hall as the start, and they're going on both sides and all around downtown. We're lucky enough to already have a great downtown. So this is just an expansion. So some great things going on around us. I'm going to turn it back over to John. He's going to take you through several things and introduce our developers.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mark. So he's using the term RAD. That's the Redevelopment Area Overlay District. This is basically the overlay district here. As you see, the vast majority of it centers around Beaufort Highway. This is Lillian Park downtown. So you have some idea of what the RAD area is, what it covers, and the importance, I think, to us as a community to get it redeveloped, get it improved, because it is the front door. The purpose of this is to give us a variety of residential options. We have we have a great single-family option right now. We really don't have much live, work, play environment in the area. Alternative transportation, high-density residential overgrowth. We're going to go into this a little more in detail later. Flex development standards with public amenities. I mean, we already have a great public amenity with the park. We just don't have the flex around it. Promote Norcross as a brand to bring investment into the community. To provide incentives for reinvestment, to connect streets and sidewalks, and improve public safety and security. Again, we'll go into this a little bit deep, in a little more detail toward the end. Part of the RAD, single-family detached dwellings, 2 stories, townhomes, and multifamily dwellings. All of those were covered in the RAD and what's going to be good for the city as a whole. This is, I think, the most important thing that I'll probably talk about today. If we do nothing, we're going to keep this. If everybody's happy, if you're happy with crummy used car dealers and pawn shops and worse, then let's do nothing. And we can have what we have. We can have our downtown decline. We can have all of our property values decline. Because if we do nothing, we're going to get nothing. And if you do nothing, and you stay static in this kind of environment, you're moving backwards because everybody else is passing you by. Everybody else is developing, as Bucky pointed out in the slide. You know, all of those cities, in essence, are our competition. They're competing with us for business development incentives. They're competing with us for jobs. They're competing with us for millennials. They're competing with us for the baby boomers who are deciding, you know, I'm going to sell my big house in Alpharetta. Do I want to buy a nice little house someplace else? Do I want to move into a multifamily environment? Do I want to move into one of these townhomes? You know, what do I want to do? All those cities are competing for that dollar, and we have to be competitive. If we aren't competitive, we're going to go backwards and we're going to lose. You know, this was a point where we can put our stake in the ground and say, you know, that Norcross is moving into a new phase. We're moving into a new generation. Charleston started doing it. Some of you heard me say this. 30 years ago, Charleston started that program. And they started at King and Calhoun. And they started putting in some quality development, quality multi-family structures. And they moved out block by block by block, going south on King Street toward the Battery. And after 20 years, frankly, they connected the park with the Battery. And it's one of the most thriving cities in the nation. In the past 10 to 12 years, they've now moved north on King. And they push out block by block by block. Any of you who've gone to Charleston were there 20 years ago and went back, you know, this year, you can't possibly recognize it. They've connected with the College of Charleston. They've moved over to Meeting Street. I mean, they've taken that one single stake in the ground, and they've expanded it out to be now one of the largest tourist attractions in the entire country, the #1 wedding destination city in the country. So, you know, are we going to do it on that grand of a scale? I hope so. But we have to start our improvement somewhere, and this is the place to start it. It's the right place to start it. It's the center of our town. It's literally the front door of the town. Investment, walkability. Some studies have shown that land value improves by 70% when you make a town walkable. We have a pretty walkable town right now, but that walkability is not connected to Beaufort Highway. That walkability goes from downtown, basically, west over the railroad tracks. That's what's walkable. We need to connect the walkability to Beaufort Highway. And again, start improving that walkability as we go south on Beaufort Highway and as we go north on Beaufort Highway. Access to talent. I mean, if we want to, again, get reinvestment in the community, get businesses to invest in this community, they have to be able to access talent. The next big generation of talent, millennials, 81 million of them. They don't want the things I wanted when I was in my 20s and early 30s. They want to be able to walk or bike to work. or at the worst have a very short commute. They aren't going to do most of my life I've commuted probably an hour each way to work. They won't do that. They just flat out will not do it. So, you know, if we want to create a community, we have to give the millennials options. You have to have a sense of place. I think we have a great place. I think downtown is fabulous. The other cities are trying to create on a little bigger scale what we have. We have the real deal. Mark will get into that when he talks a bit later about placemaking and kind of what we have. But I think we have a great place. We now have to make it. We now have to make the next steps and connect it. The library. Again, another wonderful amenity that's coming to us with the mayor and council's partnership with the county. We are now going to have the largest library in the county. Currently, our 11,000 square foot library is the second most used library in the entire system. When we get this new one, it's going to be the busiest library in the system. They're talking about 1,000 people a day come into that library. And a portion of them are going to come downtown, you know, and frequent our downtown. So with that as a stake on the other corner, you know, we're really poised to move and move forward in a positive manner. Parking, always an issue here. I mean, always an issue. Through the good work of Pat and a few other people, we've already seen some of the improvements to parking. It's going to get better. We're creating as much surface parking as we can, but it's an issue. It's an issue of the park. When the park's having heavy use, it's an issue. The deck with the library, along with what Mark will talk about a little bit later, we're going to have great parking options for people who want to utilize the park and for those who are willing to hike up the hill. I think we need more parking up here personally, but I think this is going to go a long way toward helping us in park and relieving some of the stress on the park. And then they'll get into some of the stormwater retention, parking deck, et cetera, where we partnered with the county. And with that, I'd like to introduce Matt Mason, who's with the development team, and he's going to introduce his group.
Thanks so much, John. For those of you who were at the community meeting, the first one we had, we introduced ourselves, but we're going to do it again. Just to refresh everybody on who's here from our side. Again, my name is Matt Mason with Gateway Development Services. Mac Reese right here in the front row. Mac, stand up. You don't mind? Is the principal of Gateway, founded Gateway 20 years ago. Gateway's done 4 or 5 of these public-private partnerships, which Matt can tell you more about in the Q&A if you're interested, but lots of experience with this work. Kent Collins, our partner from Austin, Texas, Centra Development, did a project like the type of project we're talking about in Decatur, and very experienced grew up in the post-properties world, and has been doing this his whole career. Kevin Edwards, Eberly & Associates, they're not too far from Norcross, and Kevin's our civil engineer. And then Mark Wolf, he'll talk later, but Dallas-based architect, JHP, you met Mark at the first community meeting. He's kind of got the good stuff to show you today, so that'll be coming up next. But I just wanted to first talk to you about kind of what we do. So 14 months ago, we got an RFP, request for proposal, from the Development Authority. It was about the 7 acres in and around Lillian Webb Park. And as you might imagine, you know, we want to come up with a project that makes sense for the developer, makes sense for the community, and most important, you know, makes sense for the demand and what the community wants and what economically the community can support. That's what we do for a living, and we call it the highest and best use study. So we did that work, and yeah, John.
Yeah, let me just say something really quick about this study. They engaged a world-class firm to do this study, and I've had a couple of questions from people saying, well, you're just kicking out a study that's going to tell you what you want to hear. Well, it is not at all the case. I'm going to put that to rest right now. These guys exist because they put out quality work, and they kick out work that can be trusted by the developer. And you'll see this a little later with the amount of money that they are investing in this project. If they kicked out what they wanted to hear versus what they needed to hear, their projects would fail, and these guys would go out of business in a heartbeat. So I just want to make that very clear because I had a couple of questions about the study.
So there's 4 or 5 food groups in real estate: hotels, office, retail, residential. There's a couple types of residential: condominium, rental, age restricted, senior, lots of different ways to look at it. So the first thing we studied is a hotel feasible? Specifically when I'm talking about all this, I'm talking about the parcel at Holcomb and Buford Highway. We looked at that, we talked to hotel developers, we studied the 2 hotel nodes in this market, right? Kind of over on Peachtree Industrial, Big Hilton, the full service market, the 85 corridor, a lot of what they call limited service hotels. And the most promising hotel use that came out of that was extended stay. We got some feedback from the community. We know there's 8 or 9 extended stay properties that aren't appealing to you right now in the community. And I guess with that, we think, spent a lot of time up here getting to know Norcross, getting to know your downtown, which is honestly a gem. Duluth did something pretty exciting with Parsons Alley, but they had to kind of grow that, from whole cloth. Y'all have it. You have this really active downtown that, when I first came back to Norcross, kind of reminded me of a mini Roswell that grew up very organically and is very local. So anyway, hotel on our viability scale, which means demand, economics, all those things, we gave it a B-. Office. We think there's demand for some office, but if you've ever hunted for some office space, you know that in Technology Park and Peachtree Corners and kind of up and down that corridor, there's lots of available office. It's a little bit older, and it's very difficult to build new product and compete for the larger office tenants you need to attract to be able to build a new project. Retail. There's a team in town called the Shopping Center Group. You've probably seen their signs. We spent a lot of time with them, did a bunch of demographic work, studied the retail on Buford Highway, the retail going in at the Forum and with the new development across the street. And we think there's retail opportunity, but there's so much great retail and restaurant downtown, it's very difficult to create a bunch of new retail on the parcel. And it's also very challenging to put it on Buford Highway in a very traditional sense. If you go to Midtown Atlanta, you see great projects with empty retail. And the last thing we wanted was empty retail at the bottom of any project, wherever it is. So to John's point, the market study, Noel Consulting, they happen to be Atlanta-based. They do about 100 studies a year for residential projects around the country. The other point is Wells Fargo and all these banks rely on firms like this to tell them what they think before they make loans. So we went to them, we said, tell us about the for sale condominium market, tell us about the age-restricted rental market, and tell us about the typical rental market, which we call market flats on here. Condominiums. There's demand for condominium flats. The challenge is there's not a lot of demand. There's a handful of units that would sell. The study said that you'd sell about 1 per month, and you'd sell it at about $165 a foot. Norcross has affordable, in some respects, single-family options, and so it becomes very difficult to build a condominium project to scale in Norcross. If you look around Atlanta, you see a couple very high-end condominium projects in Buckhead and Midtown happening. There's almost no other kind of typical for-sale condominium projects happening for a bunch of different reasons, but specifically, we were challenged. Noel was challenged to find the demand for that. Age restricted. It's a product where your rental product is 55 plus. It's restricted to that group. And there was demand for that. Our study showed that build a product like that, and there's about 120 units that could be built, but kind of upon further investigation and talking with some folks that do that kind of work, we learned that a lot of times that demographic wants to live in a community, right, with a kind of young couple and a child, and kind of all ages and all demographics, and doesn't necessarily want to be in an age-restricted product. And so it says up here, seniors also attracted to high-quality multifamily. And then finally, the most promising kind of on the rankings, big surprise here, I know this has been the topic for a long time, but is the typical market quality multifamily product. Our study showed that rents between $1,025 a month and $2,750 a month were available in the market for a premium product. So importantly, who are these folks that would rent a market rate multifamily project, and digging into the demographics of how they afford it and what their age ranges are. So there were 5 groups. Noel Consulting said young professionals, age 22 to 35, mature singles, age 35 to 55, professional couples, 25 to 44, empty nesters, 45 to 64, and then roommates, kind of right out of college sort of age, would be the 5 demographics that you'd see in a project like this. 20% young professionals with incomes of $33,000 to $75,000, paying between $900 and $1,500 for typical rent. 20% mature singles, making between $50,000 and $125,000, paying between $1,000 and $1,500 a month. Our biggest demand group was professional couples, together earning between $75,000 and $200,000, paying between $1,250 and $2,000 a month, usually for a 2-bedroom. Empty nesters, a little less than we expected actually, 15%, obviously with significant mature incomes and paying more than $2,000 a month for something larger, a 2-bedroom and den, or maybe even the largest units we have. And then finally, a handful of roommates, 2 bedrooms that 2 people share, but not as many of those as you might think. And finally, before I turn it over here, what do they rent? And you can see there's studio units, there's 1-bedroom units, there's 1-bedroom den, kind of the things I talked about, and it kind of gets dispersed across each of these types. So I put all this detail up here. I know you can't see it all and read it in detail, but we're happy to answer more questions and talk to you about it, today and next week when you have another opportunity to meet with us in an open house. But we just wanted to share that, this recommendation, our recommendation to do a project, we didn't take lightly, and we spent a lot of time studying Norcross, the market, and what is really economically viable and we think makes sense before we came and suggested something. And now I'll turn it over to Mark to tell you about the project that we've come up with.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I'm pleased to be back. We continue to be delighted to be involved in this project. We understand it's a pivotal project in your community, so it's a privilege for us to be working on it and with this development team. So with that, I'm going to walk you through just conceptually how we see this project coming together on this site. Last time I was here, we talked about kind of our discovery and context and understanding as we go into the design phase. I'm not going to backtrack on that this evening, but I did want to pause on this slide for just a minute and just let you know and reiterate that we understand that this project site has no back door, no alley. It has every exposure is precious to you. You want to create a new image on Buford Highway. We have a new neighbor as a library. We have the park, which is a big investment in your community, and then the new townhomes and the Holcomb Bridge frontage as well. So we can't hide. It's got to be a project that looks great from every public view and every angle. So we understand that. So we understand that's our mission, our challenge. This just reiterates the conditions that exist, which you're all aware of. I won't linger on this. The one factor that remains important is the topography across this site. It drops significantly from the park and from the townhomes down to Buford Highway. And it's not just all a straight line, it's wallowed out in places. So it's a little tricky. It's not a challenge that we don't see often in the Atlanta market or even down in Austin and other markets. But it actually can work to an advantage. So the overall impact of this project from, say, up at the top of the park is minimized by the fact that we have fairly dramatic grade change. Back in your Livable Communities Initiative, there was a strong statement to create a connection from the park down to Buford Highway. And whether it's some ceremonial or practical, there was this notion of a promenade to link the park to Buford Highway. So we've really taken that on. I know the library kind of danced around that a little bit, but we're going to take that on and create that promenade between this project and the library. So that's one of our goals to accomplish. In terms of, I'm blocking anybody's view, in terms of general circulation, well, let me just start with what you're seeing here. This entire 3 acres right here, so up against the park, all this in white is basically residential with some other definition that I'll get to. And this triangle, this rectangle right here is the garage. So you now have a lot of circulation in place, which is in the yellow or gold color for pedestrians. And what we want to do is be sure we link up with that. And also, this garage having a public nature to it, there's a linkage out to this promenade up to the park from the garage as well, which I'll speak to in a little more detail. And then we propose a right-in, right-out on Buford Highway, and then additional entrance on Holcomb Bridge, as you see there on the left side. We're not parking that many cars, but we think we need that amount of circulation in the garage to give options, and also recognize that those options might be important if Holcomb Bridge is backed up or Buford's backed up, so there's other ways to get in and out of the garage. Up in the top right, we talk about a future development site, which Matt will, I think, or John will return to, but there's an opportunity up there for development. Perhaps an opportunity for a signature restaurant or something like that that sits there, just Hanson Pavilion on that corner that overlooks the park. Speak to a minute just about structured parking. Obviously, you don't have a lot of that in Norcross, so this is conceived now as a 4-level garage. You can see it's surrounded by the rest of the project. So only at the entry points is there really a public exposure to the street, and some of that will be screened as well. But the main thing to understand here is this is nice, secure parking for the residents. For a lot of them, they'll walk out from their internal corridor out into that garage. And this garage, what you see around here, basically on these two sides, that kind of gray is really a light well. And this does 2 things. It allows the garage to be naturally ventilated, so we don't have to mechanically do it. It makes for an efficient garage structure. It also pushes daylight down to all sides, so it's more comfortable to be in. And then we'll have a nice passageway from the garage out to the promenade so the public can go up to the park as well. So there's a lot of virtue in having structured parking for this kind of development. But also as a city and moving forward, you don't want more surface parking on this site. You want to get more bang for this 3 acres than a surface parking. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of build this project from grade. And so you can see some color coding here on the left: garage, commercial, live, work, and residential. And it looks a little flat, but the reality is that first level garage is down at least at the Buford Highway. It's actually it's going to fold down even a little lower at one point. And then you begin to see on the hard corner where it's blue, where we call it commercial. So that's mostly leasing and fitness and activities that are more public associated with the residential. And then that browner color is where you're seeing live work come up. And so let me just take a minute to describe the live work. So those are 2 stories. You saw 2 stories there of live work on the front side. And so if you think about the Buford Highway frontage, that may not be the best frontage to sleep at grade because of the traffic, and it's going to be more of a plaza between the back of curb and the building. So we also wanted to create an opportunity here for working in this development, and also an opportunity for something that had a lot of options. So this could be small studios, it could be commercial office, it could be considered incubator space. Both levels could be worked. Someone could choose to live elsewhere, or to live elsewhere in Norcross, but actually work on site here in these units. So they're quite flexible. And so in terms of the traditional layout, someone would have their workspace at grade, move upstairs for living. And so that's what that 2 stories represents. And then you see coming up along the townhomes, you see residential on that frontage. And then as we go up here further, you see the garage stack. And then we top out. So we're actually 5 stories on the hard corner right here. And then it begins to step down 4. As you see, as we look at some other slides here, it steps down to 3, and at a scale that's similar and very compatible to the townhomes on that side. I'm just going to go through that one more time. So you start with the garage, you see the next story come up, and eventually the garage is lower than the buildings around it. Of course, this will be an elevator building, so if someone lives above the garage level, if they choose to, they can either walk or elevator down and walk out to the garage level wherever they've parked. So on the top there, you see the townhomes, and then this section cuts down from the townhomes down to Buford Highway, and it just illustrates the topography and the fall down through there till you get to Buford Highway. And you see a little bit of a notion of a pool, so there's a residential courtyard there with a pool and amenities in it. And then you see the garage stacked up. So we just want to give you a sense for how that kind of comes together as we begin to solve the puzzle. What I'll do in the next couple of slides here is just talk about the big idea relative to a design solution. So it is a fairly good-sized project, so we want to break it down into some component parts. So we think on the hard corner of Holcomb Bridge and Buford Highway, that's probably a more commercial feel to anchor that corner, and it's probably more reminiscent than perhaps the other components to downtown. Of course, there'll be a lot of masonry represented there. And then as we go towards the library and begin to go back to the park, this might take on a slightly different character, again, to kind of break down the entire project. And then just to keep going as we go back to the townhome side, we sort of have this, what we call a park side frontage. So we go from a Buford frontage to a library frontage to a park side frontage. And I don't want you to picture 3 radically different buildings. They'll all be compatible, and they'll all be working from a compatible palette of materials. But just there'll be some nuances and ways to break this down so it doesn't appear to be as large. And we think that's going to be an interesting and viable concept to go forward as we begin to detail the envelope of this building. So here we're just going to walk around the building a little bit as it's proposed. And this is just massing, and there's some kind of precedent images over there on the left side. So there is a key map up here, but I'll just go ahead and describe this. So this would be from Holcomb Bridge and Buford looking back to the north or northeast. So this is really the commercial corner. This is where we're at the maximum height, and where you're most likely to see more storefront-like transparency, like exhibited in that slide there or the one below. And then this volume here, which kind of juts out a little bit, represents that live-work area that we described earlier. This is just pivoting, looking back up Holcomb Bridge, and begin to see how the topo plays into it and how it ultimately backs down to just 3 stories. And just put some images here to suggest that all this frontage will have a high characteristic of materials that you see in your downtown, which predominantly is masonry. Now we've shifted over, so this is actually the promenade. To the right here is the library, which, you know, we assume there's going to be quite a bit of trees down through here. So there's sort of a fairly large triangle of land between the street and the library at this point. A good bit of that, we understand, will be burned to help conceal the parking level. The base of the library, you recall, is parking. But nonetheless, we're going to work with that team to soften up its edge. That edge of the library, as you head back to the park, basically comes to grade at the park. So if you're looking at it, it becomes this sliver that's a full story and almost goes down to nothing. And we're representing the grade change here as you kind of hike your way up to the park. So this character wants to have a lot of porosity in the residential building, terraces at grade, balconies above. You really want eyes on the promenade. You want to enliven it. You want it to be active. You want it to feel comfortable. So that will be our intent. And of course, we'll be working here quite a bit with the landscape architect to bring this alive and make it feel right. That slide bottom left is just representing the fact that when we come from the garage out to this promenade or back into the garage, we want that public way to feel good and inviting. And that top left slide also represents what could be the characteristics of live work along this area as well. This is going up to the top of the park, and so this is where the topo really comes into play, and you can see that on the right side, if I get out of your way you could, the relationship to the existing townhomes. So you just need to think about there's a two-story drop between those townhomes and Buford Highway, and so that kind of fares well for this project. And so there'll be a building that turns back, as you saw in the plan, against the townhomes, and then that courtyard we have spills out at grade level to the park, and we plan on having a real lively amenity building there. It's going to be a two-story building. It'll be at the amenity level of the courtyard, and stacked up and be at the same level as the park. It'll be an active pavilion. And then in this slide, that promenade is sneaking past this and going down to Norcross alongside that. And then if we come over back to Holcomb Bridge, you can see we're looking between the existing townhomes and the new development back to the left. So this will be another public way to walk back to the park. Depending on how you look at the townhomes, sometimes they're 2 stories, sometimes they're nearly 3, depending on where the grade hits it, right? So the slides over here on the left, these images kind of suggest that we're going to suppose kind of a 1/2 or a similar 1/2 story representation of how we treat that side. And we also, for purposes of this, introduced, I don't know if you can see it from the back of the room, but there's also some stone in one of these images, a couple of them actually. The existing townhomes have siding, they have brick, there's some stone, and this might be a place where as part of our palette could be some stone to pick up on that characteristic of the townhomes. We'll see how that plays out. But what is important to see here is the scale of the townhomes. We think we've represented this very accurately relative to the proposed development adjacent to it. And this is just pivoting, instead of looking left, if you will, to the townhomes, we're looking further down. So you begin to see that first corner that we started with down here. This will be less hard than the street frontage of Buford, softened up a little bit, but you'll see the ability to spill out of the residential along Holcomb Bridge, and might have some of the characteristics you see in these slides here. So just one more time to kind of summarize, we started with the commercial piece and live work here, and then it softens and massing as we go back to the park all around, so all this is residential. That is not a public pool, that would be private and part of the residential community. This amenity building, I don't know how it wants to be managed. It might be something you could reserve or use, that remains to be seen. And just to reset this, I probably should have mentioned it earlier, there's an existing shelter here. What we're showing here is most likely a very subtle access back to our building. We think we're going to need it for fire access, which would, mostly it'll look like a walkway. We'll try to make that as subtle as we can. That remains to be seen. And then again, there's this development opportunity that was in the original RFQ up here in this corner. So let me just run through. This site is about 3.25 acres as it's currently defined. We're proposing about 185 residential flats on this site and about 10 live-work units, which you saw as we defined it three-dimensionally for you. And there's about 5,000 square feet of what we call the commercial aspect. The average unit size per that study wants to be about 900 square feet of net use. That'll come, just taking the residential relative to the acreage is about 60 units per acre. And as was mentioned previously, we're going to park about 280 cars on here. So with that, I can turn it back to John.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Thanks. So I think you can see and get a sense for the quality of development that these guys want to do, what they're looking for, what they're looking to bring to our community. You know, it's really an enhancement to what we have, and certainly an enhancement to what we have on Beaufort Highway right now. Mark mentioned the count, 185 plus 10. I believe the study indicated that they thought the optimum size was 235. The DDA and council, some people, we all talked, and we just felt like that was too many. And we came to a happy medium with the development team. But in order to have what is going to be vital to make this component work, they have to have on-site management. In order to have this be a long-term, solid development, on-site management's critical. And unless you can get over about 165 or 170 units, you can't afford to have on-site management. So if you don't have on-site management, somebody's not looking at it every day. Somebody's not there every day to show prospects, you know, available units. There's not somebody there to handle, you know, issues that come up. They all have to be called into a call center, and then there's some random person who may or may not be dispatched today, or may or may not be dispatched tomorrow. So with on-site management, they have somebody there who's responsible for it every day, and is responsible for making sure that it looks the best it can look every day. So it's really, that's a vital component to making this last. We are way over time, and we want to make sure that we're respectful of time. So I'm going to run through the RAD stuff fairly quickly. I mean, you can see the varieties of what the RAD said, what we needed to meet for young professionals, growing a young population, and servicing the 55-plus population. The rental rates are really solid and are going to attract the kind of people who we want to buy houses if they're on the young end of the market, or people who have sold their houses and choose to rent, which is becoming much more common today than it was even 10 years ago. So we want that resident coming into our city. I was just told before the meeting that somebody had read a study that showed on average single-family, people who own a single-family home eat out once a week. On average, luxury apartment dwellers eat out 3 times a week. So you bring all these people into this area, and they're eating out that much, where are they going to eat? It's going to be great for our merchants. It's going to be really good for the town. And it's going to, you know, you start looking at this development, this is a Buckhead development. You know, this is a Buckhead quality development. So this is a Class A multifamily living. Again, some live-work ground. I think Mark hit that pretty hard, but that's kind of the look and feel and vibe they're going for in this development. The walkability, again, very important. That was big in the RAD, was having multiple options on transportation. So you see there's bus, walk, car. Hopefully at some point we'll have a better bike option than we have today for people. Number 4, pedestrian friendly. Again, I think we're very pedestrian friendly from the park west. This is going to make us much more pedestrian friendly from the park east. High density residential in a safe environment. That's very important. The way they designed this and the way they laid this out puts walkability on all sides of this building. As Mark mentioned, especially for the promenade they want to create going from Beaufort Highway to the park, by having residential units on that side, he used the term eyes on. So there'll be people who live there, people will be looking out their windows. You know, there'll be people so that area remains safe, and just as importantly, has a safe feel and vibe to it, so people will utilize it and walk up that way from Buford Highway. The Future Restaurant, another great potential addition to the town. You know, when you look at that pad right there and what it looks down over, and the possibility for us to bring in a better grade restaurant, rooftop dining, that level of restaurant or retail where we can utilize the view corridor that we are going to create, hopefully with this new development and obviously with what exists today on the park. Flexible standards for public amenities, I think we already have that with Lillian Webb. I think this has been achieved with what the city's done with the park and the flexible use of the park and the splash pad and all that. I think this one we've absolutely nailed. Promote the brand. You know, when I moved here, Tom Foster, who many of you know, said, "John, come look in North." We were looking in Buckhead. We were going to live in Buckhead because we had lived in Alpharetta. And we were going to live in Bucky. He said, "Come live in Norcross." I said, "Norcross, that's Buford Highway. That's used cars and bad restaurants. Why would I come live in Norcross?" And he said, "Just trust me. Come look at the Norcross I know." And when he brought me up into town and showed me Colonel Jones and 7 and the historic homes up on North Peachtree, my wife and I literally just fell in love with the city. But unfortunately, that's not the brand we have everywhere. So in order to create that brand, we have got to address Buford Highway. And we have to address it aggressively so we can change that, so that people will understand, you know, what a great place this is. And, you know, will want to move here and want to live here and will enjoy it as much as we all do and fall in love with it as hard as we've all fallen in love with this place. Then there's the investment in the community. We have to, you know, we're currently using tax abatements, infrastructure investment, fund bonds with debt service, you know, for parking fees and proceeds. You know, we need to do that and continue to do that. We have to attract investment into the city. Connecting streets and sidewalks. Again, between the library and the gateway development, we've addressed a lot of the streets, we've addressed a lot of the sidewalk issues. They're actually going to make it substantially better than it is today, with wider sidewalks, softening them up, planters, trees, etc. So it's going to be a gigantic improvement, even as you go up Holcomb Bridge and connecting with the townhomes. Stacking plan is very feasible. You can see it's a pretty flat stacking plan from the townhomes down to Buford. But the cool thing is on Buford Highway, it's going to make a hell of a statement on Buford Highway. When you go, it's going to be a noticeable, beautiful building that sits there again at our front door. Tax allocation district, we hit on that earlier, and Bucky's going to go into a little more detail on that.
If we rewind just a little bit, tax allocation district is an incentive for developers to come into you wherever you want them to come. There's about 8 or 9 of them in the county. Almost every city has them. And the idea is you use city, county, and school board taxes to help with infrastructure. And then at the end, it pops up and you get all these new taxes. So we did in order to do that, you have to do a study. It's like, what could go there? Is it viable? And so forth. We did that. That's what brought up in the study, one of the things that it said is you could put in this 31 acres of the TAD area goes farther, it's 31 acres, goes farther there, goes and even includes the extended stay over here. In the study, it said you can put 450 apartments. That's not what they recommended, that just said you could do it. And that's when the town went a little bit crazy. And so, we had another tool that's called a DCD, which is the Design Concept Development, and that's what 7 was, where you design it, we approve it, you can build it just as designed, okay? And so, what we didn't realize, sometimes when you do these studies and these things, there is conflicts. The RAIOD had been in place for much longer. And when we got through and saw the DCD and the RAIOD, they did not agree. And the RAIOD, based on our legal advice, trumps the DCD. So the thing that we can do as a council is we can go with the RAIOD, but we don't want to do it just because we can. We want to have input from the citizens and hear from you before we make the decision on that. And then at a future time, we can make all those agree. We just didn't realize there was the conflicts in there. And we also considered, it was recommended by the DDA to begin with that there be 200 apartments because of the management. But at that time, we had no proposal, we had no developer and so forth. Now they've done the studies, and they've been working on this for 14 months. It's not, and the DDA, which is your representatives, just like they are mine, has recommended that we go forward with this. And so we will take, I don't know, let me go forward on this slide, then I'll go back. You'll have two more opportunities one, to talk to the developer directly next Monday night from 4:30 to 6:30 in downtown. Then we have a policy session. We'll be looking at this at the policy session, and potentially we will have a vote on whether we would encourage them to go to contract. Right now, they just have a letter of intent. So you'll have some additional time. So we'll put this up again at the end. But that's how it's come down. We didn't know what the recommendations were going to be until they did all the studies, until the DDA worked with it. This is their recommendation. We can accept it or not. But we have to make a decision so that the DDA can do their work. And so that's kind of the point we're at right now.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. So, to give you an idea of the scope of this project, this is a $40 million project. This is, I talked to the mayor prior to this evening, this is the largest private investment in the history of Norcross. There's never been a larger private investment in the history of Norcross than this development. And I have to tell you, I have 30 years experience in real estate, commercial real estate development. And these guys are really taking a big risk. They are the first to come. So they're taking a big risk. They believe that much in Norcross and what Norcross can do and become, that they're willing to invest this kind of money in our city to help improve it, because they believe like the DDA believes, that once we make this investment and once we get it started, we're going to be able to push it out and do more and create a better place for all of us. And they believe it to the tune of $40 million, which is significant. What's also significant is they're paying $2.5 million for the land. So $2.5 million is coming back into the city through this development. There'll be a total public investment of $7.8 million, and that will be backed by a revenue bond. Now that revenue bond is just that. They're going to recapture the cost of the bond through rent on the parking deck. So the majority of that bond will be funded through rent on the parking deck, and that will occur over a 25-year period. At the end of that 25-year period, the parking deck will be free and clear, and all that money will come directly to the city. So there's a real long-term benefit to this as well, without any real significant short-term cost to us. Development schedule. Hopefully we want to get the legal agreements finalized in the fourth quarter, commence design, engineering, and then get feedback from the ARB. That's when these guys have pumped a lot of time and a good bit of money into this, but this is when it really ramps up and they really start to invest heavily. Second quarter, review approved plans, get anything they need in the way of approvals from the city and the county. Third quarter, they're going to have to confirm their pricing on construction and then finalize their debt and equity. Again, the Noel study is going to play a big part in them getting the ability to finance this. This isn't what we in the business call, this is an investment grade project. So this is something that, for example, Wells Fargo, Deutsche Bank, MetLife would invest in this kind of a project. So that they'll be seeking funding from not only banks, but institutional investors as well. Close in the fourth quarter, break ground, and then have begin delivery of residents in the fourth quarter of 2020, or second quarter of 2020 with a completion in the fourth quarter. Why is this important? It's vital because we are currently in an up market. Everybody knows this up market isn't going to last. We're going to hit a downturn. When we hit a downturn, banks immediately rein in money. They immediately start pulling back on loans, lending, and the amount of risk they're willing to take. It's vital that we hit this window. We must hit this economic cycle. If we miss the economic cycle, we could push back this development 5 to 10 years. And then we get to look at what we're looking at today for potentially another decade. We get to look at a crummy used car place. We get to look at pawn shops. I, for one, don't want to look at that for the next 10 years. I'd rather look at something that's vital, vibrant, that's very accretive to the community. As Bucky had already mentioned earlier, there's a couple of chances to talk. You'll notice there's a feedback thing, norcrossfeedback@gmail.com. So if you want to email questions or comments, there won't be necessarily responses, but I can guarantee you every single one of these has been read by the DDA. Benefits. We've talked about, I think, almost all of those. 400 people a day, housing alternatives to a wider range, a great tax base opportunity, improving property values not only along Buford Highway, but moving back up toward all of us. As that stigma goes away, that does nothing but improve all of our home values. I know I recognize a lot of faces in here, and most of the people I know can walk to this. So we all live in this community. We all live in very close proximity to this. So we want to make sure it's done right, and it's done by people who can do it right. That is vital. So with that, I'd like to introduce Paige. Paige is going to handle the Q&A section and kind of give us the rules of the road. We are a little over, but I'm still, if you all are good with it, we maybe go a few minutes past 8, but we'll take 30 minutes for Q&A. Thank you, Paige.
Excellent. Wow. I don't know about you, but my head feels like it's about to explode. That was a lot of information to take in, but it was incredibly thorough. And I know you have questions. All right, first of all, before we get started with this section, I must make sure everyone in this room is fully aware there's a video camera in the back corner. You could potentially be a YouTube spectacle based on how you behave tonight. We are recording this session so that anyone who couldn't be here tonight, particularly those who are affected by the storm or dealing with trees in the back of their house or something like that, can hear this vital information and be very well informed with facts. And so we will be placing this on the city's website tomorrow. So it will be there, so call your neighbors and tell them to check it out if they couldn't be here, okay? So we are going to start with everyone, you can ask a question, make it quick, and then I will give someone the opportunity on the team to answer that question. I will ask you to limit repetition of our questions, if we could, please, just for the sake of everybody. And then I would also like to ask you to resist the urge to come back with a lot of extra questions afterwards so that I can make sure that we keep everybody on track and get as many people to answer their initial questions as possible. Again, there is another Q&A opportunity that's an hour and a half long for you, almost 2 hours long actually, next Monday night. So, but I want to get that out there. I want you to really take the time. You made the time to come here, and we want to give you the opportunity to ask you questions. So who would like to start? I knew the video thing would intimidate you. All right, I'll walk back here. All right, you want to be the man? Go ahead.
Could you elaborate on the parking situation? It looked to me like there were 285 parking slots for about 300 people that I think you said were going to be there every day. I live over in 7. We don't have enough parking. we're figuring probably 2 slots per house. You don't even have 2 per unit. And then also part of that is it assuming that the residents of the apartment will park free? Because if they do, where's the revenue from the parking garage going to come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. They've done a lot of, this is what Kent does for a living, and they have metrics on the number of parking spaces required per unit, and this actually slightly exceeds that metric on what they're going to need. Because remember, some of these apartments will have only 1 person in them. Some will have 2, but some will have 1. So they've hit the metrics on that. It's definitely free parking. It'll be Monday through Friday. During the day, it'll be open to the public for use. So they'll be able to use the lower floor of the parking deck. And then in the evening, as the residents return, is when the library winds down. So from a parking standpoint, that actually works out great for us, because while the library's busy, we'll be able to park people in the lower level of that deck. And then when the library starts to wind down and the residents start to wind back up, we'll be able to use the library deck.
Let me add one more point. I think the question, where does the parking revenue come from, is important to answer. So the economics of our project require us to pay separate from what a resident would pay. So if you go all over Atlanta, some people pay for parking as residents, some don't. It's just, as you might imagine, a market deal that we have to decide, what makes sense. In this market right now, you wouldn't pay for parking. You pay your rent and you get your parking rights. But the project is going to have a burden of, I guess it's almost $50,000 a month in fees that we pay back to the DDA for the parking for our spaces. So it comes from us, it's built into our economics, and it's abated in other ways.
Right. All right, next question. All right, I'll take you back here.
So I really didn't hear any mention about sustainability relative to this project, yet it's in the goals that we have in terms of how we develop in our city.
Mark, I think that's for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's live? Okay. First of all, I'm sorry, where did the question come from? Back there. The contemporary building codes have changed a lot in the last few years, so you may be familiar with a LEED, L-E-E-D program. The building codes, mechanical codes have reached the point where almost you get close to a base level of LEED from the starting point. You also are here from a standpoint of site efficiency because we're going vertical and more dense. That's a sustainable aspect. And then all through the project, you're going to see the developers are motivated for the project to have low operating costs because all the common areas will have to be built into the rent. They want their rents to be competitive. The city will own the garage, so the lighting in the garage wants to be very efficient. I mean, just in the last 5 years, maybe in 3 years, what we do in garages has changed a lot. The LED fixture market has changed dramatically, so each fixture is now smart. So there'll be a low-level light in the garage at all times, and these fixtures will come on with motion or with photoelectric. So that becomes very efficient. A little more cost on the front end, but it pays off in terms of O&M throughout the life of the project. So we are day in and day out dealing with a higher level of sustainability than we did 3 to 5 years ago. I mean, that's just our practice.
All right.
Does that help? Okay.
Thanks. I'm all for the transforming of eyesores. This particular plan does not address those eyesores. However, it just knocks out the bakery. Right, there's still a car line directly across the street from it unless I missed something. Is that a future plan or is that part of this development?
No, it's not part of this development, but you're making the point I was hoping to make, which is, so now you're OL Motors, and this has now come across from you. Is the highest and best use for the person who owns that property still Oval Motors? It's absolutely not. You know, that's how the Charleston example, how they banged it out block by block by block. We make this block better, then we move across the street, we make that block better. As we make that block better, then the block next to that, the highest and best use is no longer a used appliance store or a pawn shop. It becomes much more, the highest and best use moves on to better things which are better for all of us.
Well, let me add this, the idea, one of the reasons we are even looking at this today is we own this land, the city owns this land, so we can control our destiny, as opposed to, we don't own the motor thing. But once the library comes in and a development such as this comes in, then it will be worth more for other people to come to follow that. That's the whole idea why the RAIOD, that long RAIOD was put in place. And it was put in place to give incentives to do what we want and to keep out what we don't want. So it's only, they can only do that when the market is at a certain level. So that's the idea, is you're just raising the market level so that land is worth more, so that they can sell it to do something that is a higher and better purpose. But we own this land, which is kind of a difference there.
So it's probably bad timing, but really high tide raises all ships. I mean, in a very positive way. Please, I realize that. Okay, who has another question? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask, when Mayor Johnson was giving his presentation, he, one of the slides said something that I didn't know if it was a typo or not. Is foot traffic really down in downtown Norcross? And can we elaborate on that?
Kate, where was here? Kate did a study of which all the merchants in downtown, and I think 80% of them said that there was, over last year, it was down somewhat. That's maybe too much of a generalization, but I think that that's in the ballpark. But I mean, again, we don't have empirical data, this number of people through the door and so forth. This was kind of, how is traffic as opposed to last year. And I think in most cases, they felt like it was down, not significantly, but again, Rock 10 hasn't moved out either. So that we're trying to be proactive on that. So, yeah, we did get that information from a study of the downtown merchants.
Yes, sir.
Can you provide do you have a market study on rental rate for other apartments in the area? And if so, will you be making that available?
Is that a question?
We have comps for, when you say that, are you saying comparable properties like what we're going to build, or other properties in Norcross?
Well, I think comparable is somewhat of a loaded term. I mean, if we go and look at a two-bedroom apartment of, let's say, approximately the same size, 800 to 900 square feet, then that would be comparable, as opposed to trying to value, well, this one is nicer for that reason.
Well, no, actually that makes a huge difference, because an 800 square foot apartment that was 50 years old versus a property that, an A quality apartment that was built 2 years ago, there's a vast difference in the rents to those.
Will we get that study? Are you going to make that available to us?
Yeah, we did a market study of both comparable projects, A quality of projects in your comparable cities, in the other cities that were also mentioned on that slide, in Duluth, similar type of projects that we're proposing.
And when we come or if you want to join us Monday, or we can get together between now and then, so to get to the answer, Noel Consulting, they have to go look at what the comps are. So one of the comps is out of the Gwinnett Ballpark, the Cool Ray project that was built right next to the ballpark. One of the comps is Avalon. Obviously, that's a very different, much more premium product. There's almost 8, I think. There's really not a lot of this in and around Norcross. There's 2 new projects in Peachtree Corners, one that's opening soon and one in several years. But we'll be happy to show you how this stacks up and the math on what sort of rent hocus pocus, if you will.
Okay, so you can bring that with you on Monday.
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
that'd be great. You have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everybody. These are my concerns, and I don't know if I speak for anybody else. You mentioned that you're targeting millennials and people over 55 to 65 to come and live in our community, and I'm all for that. Would like to see more families, because we're a family and we've been here for 20 years. What about the next generation? The next generation that's coming beyond millennials. Typically, we're hearing they're going to be more conservative, they're going to be more knowledgeable about their footprint and all of that. What thoughts have you given to that? That's my first question. Number two, my everyday running of children takes me from Brookhaven to Swanee. I'm seeing all the change. I'm driving the change. And I drive in Norcross every day. Have you done your traffic study to see how this 185 apartments is going to affect our everyday living, those of us who are in the single-family homes? And number three, we were told it was going to be 99 apartments. It's now double, and that's a little disturbing.
Okay, so let me address number 3 first. Okay, we originally recommended about 200. We thought that was right. At the time of the kind of hysteria of 2 years ago, council decided to cap it at 100. But now that we've had time to study it and spend some time, and look at the RAD, and look at the LCI study, and look at, frankly, what's happening around us with other communities, we've moved back to that, close to that number, because it's the right thing to do. It's how we get the highest quality. It's how we get the very best possible development we can get at that count. It's lower than what the study suggested. It's higher than what the council wanted, or what the council voted for 2 years ago. But now that we've done study, we've actually seen what they want to do, and they have the facts to support that it can bring the type of people, which gets to your question number 1, which is, if you looked at the breakdown, professional couples made up the majority of that, with incomes between 75 and 200,000. That was 39%. They made up the majority of it, and that was kind of Gen X to older millennials. And then you have the kind of younger millennials behind that, which is where the market is today. You'll notice demographically there's a bit of a dip. Just as Gen X was a dip behind the boomers, now you have the millennials up here at 81 million. There'll be a dip behind the millennials with this Gen Z or whatever I think it's Gen Z they're calling now. But then behind them is going to be a gigantic wave as the millennials kick into full swing of starting families. So keeping something that's attractive, that's gonna move people into our area, that will be accretive in nature to our community is important, and that's why we felt this fills that bill. And keeping it, in a community that's, on-site managed and of the highest possible quality will then attract the next generation as well as it moves through. And as you mentioned, the next generation is going to be even more conservative, going to be much more well-informed, certainly than I was at their age. And they're going to want the things that we're going to have here. They're going to want to be able to walk to town. But hopefully in 10 years or 15 years, they'll be able to walk to a grocery store. They're going to be able to walk to retail that they want. The shopping center across the street will see the value in upgrading they're pretty much fully leased, but if they upgrade their look, can they generate better rents? If they upgrade their tenancy, can they create better rents? Yes, they can. So I think that's where the next generation comes, is in developing and creating a better place around Buford Highway where they want to be. We can't force them to be there. They have to want to come there. We have to create the environment, if we want to be good stewards for what's going to be good for the town in the long term and support the beautiful downtown we have to create a want. And, this is the starting point to creating that want.
Traffic study.
Oh, and then the traffic study, yeah. So that's the reason for originally when it was designed, we were looking at Holcomb Bridge entrance. And because of the concerns that we've given to the development team, they added the Buford Highway entrance. They took rental area out, added another entrance on Buford Highway that's going to allow people to do right in, right out. That'll hopefully alleviate some of the traffic on Holcomb. But again, as if you want to move to the next generation and you want to address the leads concern, densification is a must. And if we can replace West Rock with something that is, that's going to be very dynamic, and we have the base and the livability, they can walk to work. They don't have to drive. And as this moves out and continues to expand into areas that people are going to want to be in, are going to want to live and work in, office developers aren't stupid. They're going to want to build where their base is. So they're going to want to have things like that.
Can I follow up?
Yeah, one more. You want to get to
Real quick.
Okay.
This is my comment on that. Norcross was a gem. We found it over 20 years ago by accident. And we fell in love with it because it's a traditional small town feeling of home. And we've tried to keep that. Having driven every day from Brookhaven to Swanee, this looks more like a trend. It looks like everybody's doing it. Norcross wants in on the game. And I understand the revenue and all that. But I just want to reiterate, if you're going to do it, it's got to be kept in the classic Norcross style, to where it accentuates the gem that we have, and our gem is not, our GEM is not trending. It's not trendy, but yet all of these other developments that I'm seeing every day look very much the same. And that's not who we are.
And the DDA couldn't agree more. We could not agree more with that, and it's vital. And they've taken the feedback that's been given to them, and frankly have come up with even better ideas on how this is going to look and fit and feel. And we all love this because it's a small town. We like the small town. This is what I like. But I want our small town to be viable in 20 years. I don't want our small town to die. And that happens to small towns every day. You see small towns die, and then they get reborn. And I don't want to go through the dying process to hit the rebirth. Let's just, let's move into the next generation, because the next generation doesn't think like we do. They have an entirely different concept of how they want to live, how they want to work, and where they want to play. They're not like us. So we have to be forward-thinking and looking at what's going to sustain our town, for 20 or 30 years.
Great point. Yes, ma'am.
Let me get your mic.
Oh, I just want to watch Bucky run.
I just want to express my appreciation to John and all the committee. You all have done a lot of hard work, spending a lot of time, and of course we've got a lot of different opinions from all of us. But thank you so much. I want you to know we all appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate it.
And with that, we should quit.
So my question has to do with commercial, and when will the community have an opportunity to know what might go in that corner on Holcomb Bridge and Buford? And then one last thing, I love my neighbors, but I don't share a wall with them. I live at Parkside, and we're single-family homes. We're zero lot line. We're not townhomes. So please make that correction to your terms and also to amend. You laugh, but it is an important distinction economically and aesthetically. They're not townhomes.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Well stated.
Thank you.
Well, the question about what's on the corner,
Commercial.
the commercial,
Yeah.
primarily that's going to be the leasing management office, and probably the fitness center.
And
So when will we know?
that will
Well,
be,
that's what it's going, in the development that they're working on, that's what it's going to be.
Well, it just depends on if we choose, we may choose to put the fitness center up by the goal is not to put a commercial use on that corner because it's a problematic corner there to put that there. And so that's why we thought we wanted to look commercial, and as Mark said, to stake your claim right there on that busy intersection, but to make it look commercial, but to incorporate parts of the project that would be there anyway.
So is that the fitness center for the apartments?
Yes.
So it's not a community.
No.
Oh,
We hope you see, we tried to do everything we could to create a commercial look and feel along Buford Highway and on that corner, and our research tells us you can't drop in a true retail restaurant tenant, or we would have put Marlowe's Tavern on the corner. Trust us.
All right, just a few more questions.
More about timing, you said there's 2 more meetings coming up for input. So does that mean that you, the council, will be voting on this in a positive manner within November?
well, I don't know whether it'll be possible or not.
Well, I'm hoping you did. I think you guys have done a
Yeah,
great job.
But I like that a lot better.
That idea, the idea is that as the radar which is the overriding document, the 200 or 195 could be the number going in there. We put a DCD that said there can only be 100, so there's a conflict, but right now the radar overrides it, but we don't want to do that behind the scenes or anything like that, and just say, oh yeah, the radar takes care of it. We want to give a clear direction to the DDA, because they're spending a lot of time, and then the developer a lot of money. We want to give a clear vote, go forward with this concept or not, at our October meeting. So
that was a really important distinction for all of us in the DDA, for mayor and council. We spent a lot of time with the city council, we spent a lot of time with the mayor and staff, reviewing this and putting this together, what's going to be best. But we felt it was vital that that's why we had the meeting several weeks ago. That's why we're here tonight. That's why the developers are making themselves available on Monday for a couple hours for one-on-one time. Is we want to make sure this was out front, out in the open. Everybody was aware of it. Not just jam this through in a back room, have the council vote on it with no, input from the public. It was, and the DDA, council, mayor all felt very strongly about that.
yes,
2 more questions.
Are the documents to back all this up available on the internet for us to look at? Someplace we find that?
The slideshow is going to be on our meeting for policy session, and then on Monday night, the developers will be there, and y'all can bring the documents that night, right? The studies and so forth.
Well, I think they'll make available what they can, but let's not forget this is a private development.
But the public documents that are going to go to the council and the DDA are seeing.
This is what we're.
Well, we can make
this is what
something
we're-
available, and everything we can make available, we will. But until we have a finalized deal with the developer, the economics, obviously have to remain until we have our LOI negotiated, and if we get a positive nod from the council, then we'll finalize that, and when we have a deal, then it will go to council as a deal available to review. But we obviously, for negotiation purposes, we can't.
And we have to vote on the bond that goes forward, so that's a council vote on
I'm
that.
just asking if the public documents that are available under the law are going to be on the internet, where we can look at them ahead of time.
Everything that is not executive session at this point will be available. The actual negotiation document, until the contract is a formal contract, it has to be presented in an open meeting with, so forth. So the contract is not negotiated, it's not available. But any of these documents that are backup documents would be available to you.
And again, the developers will be available Monday for one-on-one they, to share the information that they're allowed to share this plan. And it's pretty substantial.
And let me make one last comment. You've got the mayor and council, which are 6 people. You've got the DDA, which are 5 people. You've got staff members in the city that deal with this. And then you've got the ARB, which is a 5-member board, Joe? 5-member board, all looking at this as well. So you're well represented, across, to look at these and to tweak it as we go. So this, and again, this is the...
and there are different opinions. There are big different opinions on how we should go and which way we should go. And, there were people who wanted to push big apartments. There were people who wanted to push no apartments. And so as we kind of meshed in, we came up with what was really the best development for the long term for the city that we think our hard corner, our pin corner for the city can provide.
One final question.
One last question.
So,
I just wanted to ask, why did you decide not to do condominiums?
Well, as they showed in the report, the Noel Consulting said they could only absorb about 1 a month. So, and 120 maximum. So, 1 a month, that's a 10-year sellout. And
That was the senior.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. That was the senior piece. The what was it?
Yeah, so there were really only a handful of condominium flats that we could build, and if we chose to do that, we'd have to intermingle, say, 20 for sale units with whatever else for rent, and that's just not something banks finance. It's not a typical project. So that's where we landed with it.
This is the last one.
Last question. One more.
Am I correct in my assumption that the council still has overriding capability? That it's not the DDA's decision solely? And what is the deadline that the council would put on this, that they will make their decision?
At this point, it will depend, the council is going to take it up at policy, and if we decide to move it to the October council session, there could be a vote. That would be the earliest. They can decide to put it, to put it off, but that would be the earliest decision. And that decision would not be the final decision. The final decision would be made once we see the actual development, the contract, and then the financing piece. But no city money will go into this. It will be the tax abatement will take care of this bond. So the city's not paying for the bond, but they're sponsoring the bond, and at the end of the day, we'll own the parking deck.
You still have overriding.
Oh yeah. Well, because they control the purse strings, so we can't do it. It can't be done without council. And quite frankly, we as the DDA as a group decided that we didn't want to do it, even if we could. We want city council, mayor, staff, all buying in. So that was a big item for us. So with that, Paige, thank you so much. Again, thank you all for coming out. This is very important.